Let's start with the fifth module of computer system architecture, our course. So in this module, we are going to see how to design three types of pipeline. So I'll just quickly uh, display the contents of this particular module. So the three broad categories or three broad pipeline types that we have to discuss is instruction pipeline, arithmetic pipeline, and finally superscalar pipeline design. So we'll have to see some examples, see some terminologies associated, see some of the processes which are associated with all these type of pipelines, and also check how to design an instruction pipeline or an arithmetic pipeline or even a superscalar pipeline. So let's start with the instruction pipeline design. So I'll quickly go through the theoretical portion of instruction pipeline. So we all know that when you talk about an instruction pipeline, it has got at least four major stages. So in this pipeline, normally it is taken to be as 5 stages, whereas the first stage is the fetching of instruction, then decoding the instruction to know what is the purpose of the instruction, then fetching the operands, then execution, the actual execution, and finally writing the results back to the main memory. In some pipelines, the operand fetch and execute will be put together. So it will be like the instruction fetch will be done and the system decodes the instruction to know what is the purpose of the instruction, and then first the operands will be fetched and then it will be executed. So these two will be actually combined together as one single unit, and finally writing back the results to the main memory. So that is about the instruction execution phases. So this is a primary example of an instruction pipeline. So what you see here is a 7-stage instruction pipeline. So we have seen all the 5 stages, but in the case of this pipeline, you have 3 units of execution. Okay, 3 stages dedicated for execution itself. So totaling to 7 stages. Okay, so there is a single fetch stage, a single decode stage, single issue or operand fetch stage. Then you have 3 stages for execution and finally 1 stage for writing the results back to main memory. So this is the idea behind a k-stage instruction pipeline. You can have one copies or one functional unit per stages of fetch, decode, issue and write back, and you can have one or more stages of the execute. Then as I said, fetching will be done on a basis of one instruction per cycle, and decode will reveal the function of the instruction. Then issue will fetch the corresponding operands and also will reserve the resources that are required for the execution of that instruction. Then in the execute stages, you will actually perform the execution of the instruction, and finally you will write the results back to the registers if it is a register to register operation, or to the memory if it is a register to memory operation. So when you talk about an instruction pipeline, we have something that we have to understand about. It is called in order instruction scheduling. In order instruction scheduling, as the name says, if you have a program or you say a process when it is under execution, so you have got 10 instructions and all those 10 instructions are fed into the instruction pipeline in the same order as if they have appeared in the original program, then such kind of a scheduling is called in order scheduling. I repeat, if the instructions of a program is fed into the instruction pipeline in the same order as if they appeared in the program, then such kind of a scheduling is called in order scheduling. So here you can see this is an example of an in order instruction scheduling in the case of this given pipeline. So you have a program here. So the program is, the first instruction is you have to load the content of the memory which is addressed by the variable y to the register R1, and in the second instruction you have to load the contents of the memory addressed by Z to the register R2. Then you have to find the sum of the contents of R1 and R2 and store it to R3. Then on the fourth instruction, you have to store the result of R3 to the memory which is addressed by X. So what happens here is the instruction was actually X is equal to Y plus Z. So X, Y and Z are actually memory locations. So you get them copied into the register, get the operation done and store the result uh, back to the main memory. So that is in the case of first four instructions. Now what is the second instruction? It is A is equal to B into C. So what you have to do? Again you have to load the content of B, then load the content of C. Then you have to what you have to do? You have to get a register where you can actually find the product of R4 and R5, and finally you will have the result at R6, and that result will be copied to the memory location addressed by the variable A. A is not the accumulator here, A is a variable. Okay, so please don't get confused by it. Now, what are these black rectangles that you actually see in the sequence of a pipeline execution? They are called stalls or pipeline waits. Okay, so you can see in the first case, where in the first cycle you start with fetching the first instruction. In the second cycle you will be decoding the first instruction. In the same time you will be fetching the second instruction. In the third cycle, you are issuing the first instruction, whereas you are decoding the second instruction and you are fetching the third instruction. When you move on in the fourth cycle, you are starting to execute the first instruction. So what was first instruction? You have to copy the content of Y to R1. Okay, so that is the execution that has to happen. So there are three stages of execution. What you have to do? You have to start with copying, right? So you copy. Okay, so you copy, so that is done, and at the end of the so since this is a 7-stage pipeline, at the end of the 7th clock cycle you will have the final result uh, R1. Okay, so the content of Y is stored into R1. Similarly, the content of Z will be stored into R2 in the 8th clock cycle. But what happens to this particular instruction? Even though it was fetched in the 3rd clock cycle, decoded in the 4th clock cycle, it has to get the operands. And what are the operands? Operands are R1 and R2, whose result will be available only after 7th clock cycle and 8th clock cycle. So what you have to do? You have to make the pipeline wait until that data are available. So you will have to wait till 8 clock cycles and then continue executing the issue of the third instruction. Similarly, the fourth instruction will have to wait for decoding until the corresponding data is available. So here you can see the third instruction is R3 is equal to R1 plus R2. So this final result will be available with R3 only after the successful completion of execution, which means only after the 12th clock cycle. So what you have to do, if you have to send R3, the content of R3 back to X, you will have to wait till that 12th clock cycle to start with the execution. So in the 12th clock cycle, you will start with the execution. In the 11th clock cycle, you will be issuing. Okay, so you will start with the execution, and finally in the 15th clock cycle, you can actually get the data into the memory location specified by X. Similar is in the case of R4, R5, R6 and the last instruction also. They also will have to stall according to the non-availability of resources. So this is in the case of in order instruction scheduling, because we don't have made any changes in the order of the sequence of the execution. We are executing the instructions as such as given in the program. Suppose if we could rearrange these given instructions so that you could save the pipeline from stalling, then that is called out of order scheduling. Okay, so out of order scheduling, I'll show you. So yeah, this is an explanation about what is happening here. Moving to the next slide. So in the case of this pipeline, in the case of the first pipeline, you actually required nearly 23 clock cycles to complete the execution of all these instructions. 23 clock cycles were required for the complete execution of all these instructions. If you could think about rearranging the order, like rearranging or taking the instructions which are not dependent on each other to go to the top positions of the sequence, in that case you can significantly reduce the time taken by the pipeline. Okay, so that is called reordering the sequence. So I'll show you an example. The same problem, the same program, when it was actually reordered, you could save nearly 6 clock cycles. So earlier it was 23, now you could complete it within 17 clock cycles, even if you have a minimal stalls that is happening within between the stages. Okay, so this is it. The timing measure eliminates the undue effects of pipeline startup or draining delays, and you could, if you could reorder the execution, then you could save at least 6 clock cycles, and that is how it counts to 17 cycles. Now, what are the mechanisms that you can adopt in the case of an instruction pipeline? That is our next topic of discussion. So there are actually 4 mechanisms that you can make use of. First one is prefetch buffer. Then you can use of multiple functional units. Then you can think about some internal data forwarding and also about hazard avoidance. So these are the 4 mechanisms by which you could ensure efficiency of an instruction pipeline. So we'll see all these 4 in detail, starting with the prefetch buffer. So as the name says, prefetch buffer is going to help with the fetching of instructions as well as data, or what we say the operands. So there are some dedicated buffers which are capable of holding some data, some intermediate values, so that you can use it in a later time. So there are 3 types of buffers available: sequential buffer, target buffer, and finally loop buffers. So as the name says, sequential buffer is going to store the next instruction of the pipeline. Sequential buffer is going to store the next instruction of the pipeline, whereas a target buffer is used to store this target or the jumping address of a particular branch statement. So the target buffer is going to contain the jumping address and the relevant data of a branch statement. Whereas when you talk about a loop buffer, it is going to control, or it is going to contain the data specific to a loop which is under execution. So all these are various types of prefetch buffers that you can use in the case of an instruction pipeline. Sequential buffer, target buffer, and loop buffer. So this is a pictorial representation. Here you can see the sequential buffer. There are 2 buffers. So they are going to contain the sequential instructions which are indicated by the program counter. So you have the program counter. Based on the program counter, you can fetch the next instruction, and those will be stored inside the sequential buffer. Talking about the target buffer, you will be having contents here in the target buffer when you have some instructions that results in a branch. Then the corresponding details will be entered into the target buffer. Similarly, if you have a loop, then you will have the loop buffer being controlled to contain the data relevant to that particular loop. Okay, so here you can see there is a memory, there is a fetch unit, and the fetch unit is going to control all the prefetch buffers, and it is from the buffer the data or the instruction is fed into the original pipeline. I repeat, it is from the buffer, the corresponding buffer, the data or instruction is fed into the instruction pipeline. So next is multiple functional unit. As the name says, this is the policy to have multiple copies of same units which can achieve same functionality. So you are going to copy, or you are going to make copies of same functional unit within the system, and that is the idea behind multiple functional units. So here you can see a certain stage being utilized more often in a pipeline, and it may result in a bottleneck. So the solution is that so if you have a certain stage in a pipeline which is being used and overused for a lot of time, then that particular stage may result in a bottleneck. So the solution that was proposed was to have multiple copies of the same functional unit, so that there will not be any bottleneck, and things can be done in parallel. So this was actually accomplished by having multiple units with the same functionality, or it is a primary example of what we have learned about the hardware parallelism. Okay, so this is the pictorial representation. So here you can see there is an instruction from memory, there is an instruction fetch unit, and the instruction fetch unit will fetch the instruction. Then it will be provided to the decode and issue unit, where they will be decoding the instruction, analyzing the computation that is required, and then issuing the corresponding data which is necessary for execution. Moving further, you can see something called a reservation station, which is available with the copies of functional unit, which is being actually under overuse in the case of a sequential um, computer. Okay, so all these functional units are having their own reservation station, and all of them are connected to load registers and also to memory. About the multiple functional unit, as I said, there will be a reservation station along with each of the functional unit, or each copy of the functional unit, and they are used to resolve the data or resource dependency among the successive instructions entering the pipeline. Then the operations. So what happens is, if there is a conflict, then the operations will have to wait in the reservation station, corresponding reservation station of the unit, to get executed. So it also serves as a buffer to interface the pipeline functional units with decode and issue. And it is each of the reservation station will have its own tag. Okay, so that tag is monitored by a tag unit, and the tag unit will check the tag of all the currently used reservation, all the currently used registers of the reservation station. Then if multiple units or multiple functional units of a stage which is being under overuse is available, then you can significantly reduce the usage and also lay out a better performance index. So that is about multiple functional units. Moving further with the third one, which is internal data forwarding. So in the case of an internal data forwarding, as the name says, you can have either a store load forwarding, or a load forwarding. So this is nothing but you are going to transfer the data between the available functional units. So in the case of a store and load forwarding, you will have a load operation, and all the load operations can be replaced with move operation. So the move operation is said to be comparatively simpler than the load operation. So instead of having load operation, all those load statements will be replaced with a move operation. Similarly, in the case of internal data forwarding, you could find that the register transfers were faster than the memory access. So all these had led to internal data forwarding, which is you are supposed to reduce the memory traffic. You will find the data being used, the same data being used, and you will make it used inside your system. So that is internal data forwarding, and this will obviously help in reducing the execution time, because you don't have to load it from the memory, so you can save that time. The last one is hazard avoidance. As we have said, there are three types of hazards: row hazard, war hazard, and wow hazard. row hazard or read after write, war hazard or write after read, and wow hazard or write after write hazard. So if you can employ some out of order execution or some rearrangements and then resolve the conflicts, then that is called hazard avoidance. Okay, so the read and the rule to follow here is that the read and write operations on variables which are shared between the functions uh, should be given on a timely basis without having any hazard. So first you have to analyze the hazard, then take the corresponding remedial measures to avoid such kind of hazards. So this is an example. This we have already discussed in the previous module, so I don't think we have to spend our time again on this. Now, that's all about this lecture. So we'll continue with this module in the next lectures to come. So as we have instructed before, you will have to prepare your lecture notes and submit it before the deadline. And doing so, you will claim your attendance as well. So thank you. Have a great day.